Hello everyone, my name is Brandon Wilson and I am in IDS2144 and I'm going to present why I think AGI should be implemented in society. So the first thing we're going to discuss to get into this topic is the differences between weak AIs and strong AIs and what AGI actually is. So first of all, we have right now weak AIs like ChatGPT, Grammarly, things like this. They're also known as artificial narrow intelligence. And what they do is they take information from a database and then implement it into given scenarios. In contrast, an AGI is something that has a greater understanding and intelligence. So rather than just simply know what it's told to do, it does things independently and understands what needs to be done to solve said problem. I think a very good example of this is, say, if you ask ChatGPT what time it is. It'll take from its database the time, and it'll tell you it's 8 o'clock. But AGI, when asked the same question, would give you the right answer as well, but rather than just know the time based on information given, it understands the concept of time. It understands how it flows, what that means, and what that is, and how that is important to you. So that's sort of the difference between what we have now and what we're going to have if AGI actually does come into being and exist. And one other thing I should touch on is ASI, which is sort of a big problem for a lot of people. They theorize that artificial general intelligence will become ASI, which is artificial superintelligence. And basically, rather than just being human level of thinking, like general intelligence is, a superintelligence will be like the next level. It'll be above us in almost every standard. And that can be very scary for a lot of reasons. But before we get into that, let's start with the benefits of AGI and what we could potentially be seeing if we do actually accomplish this. For starters, they're going to improve all the sort of AI capabilities that we have now, and they're going to make them much better and just more usable in general. Now, a good example of this, I personally think, is customer service, especially over the phone. How many of us hate that stupid AI monotone voice that you know is just going to take forever to, at the very least, get to an actual person you can speak to and start solving your problems? Now, imagine if you were talking to an AGI. It not only can understand your questions better, know what you need and want, but it will also have an emotional intelligence, which we have very little, if at all, seen in current AIs. So it'll actually be able to help you and get you what you need. Another sort of example of how an AGI could help improve AI systems that we already have is in what we have right now, which is autonomous vehicles and in self-driving cars. What we currently are working with is cars that have this database, ANIs. Now, they're very complex ANIs with a very large database, but they're still limited by the fact that they only know what to do because they're told that. They don't understand, they don't have this human level understanding of danger and what they can do to prevent it. Now, if we were properly able to implement AGIs, they would be essentially as capable, if not more capable, due to lack of, we'll say people get tired, they get sleepy, they get unfocused. AGIs are much less likely to have this problem, and they'll still have that same sort of awareness and capabilities that a human at their full potential would have. And so not only would it improve autonomous vehicles, but it would also improve driving in general, because accidents would be far reduced due to much safer driving. But let's talk about some other examples. I want to dive into the medical field. So we're going to start with, say, what is recently becoming a very interesting and popular use for AI in this field, and that is for cancer screening. And what they're doing is essentially they're taking these scans that you look for cells that may seem cancerous, or any early signs that you can actually use to predict and start treating way before it becomes a deadly disease. And normally human eyes would look at them and they would determine whether they see anything that may be problematic. But the problem is that it's very difficult to see, and there's a lot of room for error when humans are looking over these things. So we have been taking AI more recently, and we've been giving it this database of different, what it's looking for, what we want it to see, what we want it to try to address. And we've been applying it to cancer screenings and having it sort of do the work alongside us. It's not replacing us, but it's sort of this backup. It's saying, hey, I looked through all these screenings and I flagged, say, this one because it seems to have problematic readings. And so then you'll have the humans go back and look at it, and they'll find that, hey, maybe maybe we should actually start treating it. And if we were able to implement AGIs into this, we would not only be able to simply scan them more in depth and more thoroughly, but we'd also be able to actually start using it. It would start being able to help us create cures, better able to diagnose patients, very unbiased. It's one of the biggest things with AI is that it is emotionally intelligent, but for the most part, it can remain fairly unbiased. And that'll be very helpful in the medical field, as sort of this human error that we have often leads to misdiagnosis and can cause a lot of harm as a result. So the first most prominent danger that people often worry about when talking about AGIs is with recursive self-improvement, where it becomes an ASI and it gets out of hand, it gets out of control. We no longer have this sort of influence over it that we would have before. And that's kind of been the biggest worry that I've heard about, especially from speaking to people just out in the world, at my job, in different places. This is their biggest concern or fear. The next big concern or fear is that this AGI that we do develop doesn't have the same moral sort of guide or standards that we do. It won't value the same things that we value, and that could cause problems as well. And then finally, the sort of a bigger worry as well is it'll be used militarily in sort of big, large-scale projects that could be highly destructive and could cause, say, the next World War. But let's go ahead and talk about some different regulations that we could uphold to prevent this from ever happening in the first place. So the first sort of regulation or guides that I think we should put in place are going to be hardware limitations. While trying to develop AGIs, our biggest problem is that while theoretically it's possible for an AI to replicate human intelligence, given enough time and the proper hardware, we aren't currently technologically at that level yet. So say if we finally do obtain an AGI, there should be hardware limits that prevent it from becoming something more like an ASI, to where even if its programming is like hyper optimized, it'll still have trouble actually reaching that higher level of processing and thought because it doesn't have the proper physical components to do so. The next thing I think that should be implemented still goes along with this sort of hardware idea, and it is going to be a physical kill switch. So that way, if things do happen to get out of hand, our very last resort is to just completely shut it down and prevent it from getting out of hand altogether. Now, before it gets to that point, before it gets out of level, there should be other regulations, like say, right now, a good example of something that has affected affected the world in a similar way to AI is sort of nuclear technologies. And what we right now have is sort of treaties preventing us from sort of ending the world altogether. And more than likely, we're going to need something similar when it comes to AGIs to prevent them from sort of helping us destroy each other. So there should probably be some sort of national treaty that prevents us from using them harmfully against other countries in a large scale way. And then finally, you should have to have, say, a national license. Like your nation has to approve you or your company actually being able to sort of monitor and keep this AGI under control and actually enforce that you'll follow the proper hardware regulations. Now, if we do manage to do all these things, I know it's easier said than done, but I think it'll be an incredible step for humanity if we're actually able to get this AGI or AGIs working together and helping us improve as a society. And to try to ban them all together, here in America, it would be highly counterintuitive to our Constitution and our personal freedoms, but also just as people, we would be limiting ourselves and causing ourselves more harm by not trying to help solve our problems. And that's all, so thank you for listening and have a good day.